Good afternoon, students, and welcome back to the class of macroeconomics. In previous class, we have discussed about the meaning of money, functions of money, difference between money and near money, and what are the evils of money that any economy faces. In today's class, we are going to discuss about the demand for money and supply of money. Now, today, first of all, we will understand that why money is demanded and how the money supply is measured. So, we will discuss in this chapter. The name of chapter is the demand for money and supply of money. In this, we will be dealing about the demand for money. There are two views regarding the demand for money. One is classical view, another is modern view. Then we'll discuss about the supply of money and its components. Third, we are going to discuss about the factors affecting money supply. Now, first of all, we have to understand that why money is demanded, or what is the purpose for demanding money. Now, one thing that we have to remember is that demand for money is different from that for demand for other commodities. That means other commodities are demanded because they possess utility, or they are having utility to satisfy human wants, whereas it is not the case with money. According to the classical view, money is not demanded for its own sake. Money is having no utility, no capacity to satisfy human want in itself. Therefore, money is the medium of exchange, and therefore it is demanded whenever there is some exchange to be made. That means, according to classical views, money has to perform only one function, that is, money has to act as an medium of exchange. So, money in itself is useless until and unless it is having a ability to buy goods and services. So, money's demand is derived demand, not direct demand. Direct demand means demand for those things which are capable of satisfying human wants directly, whereas money cannot satisfy human want directly. It helps in buying those things which can satisfy human wants. That is why money's demand is derived demand. In the views of classical economists, thus these writers emphasize only the medium of exchange function of money. So they have not considered any other function of money. They considered only one function of money, that is to act as a medium of exchange. So according to them, the demand for money is determined by objective factors. Objective means quantitative factors. Objective factors known as the volume of transaction and the factors that determine the amount of goods and services produced and transacted. That means those factors which are affecting the quantity of goods produced and purchased will determine the demand for money. So it is indirectly dependent upon those factors which are affecting demand for goods and services will also affect the demand for money. That is why it is indirectly related with the quantity of goods and services. Further, the classical views, particularly that of Fisher, Irving Fisher, he has given a quantity theory of money that we will be discussing in later on in the next chapter. But right now we have to remember that one of the classical economists who gave his views on the demand for money is Irving Fisher. So, in the view of Fisher, was that since the demand for money is based on the volume of transaction in the economy, which is relatively constant in the short run, that means the volume of transaction remains more or less same or constant in the short run, the demand for money also remains constant in a short run. So Irving Fisher was in the view that demand for money remains unchanged in the short run. As we have discussed, the demand for money depends upon the volume of goods and services, and as volume of goods and services remains constant in a short run, therefore the demand for money will also remain constant in a short run. Now we have seen that there are number of functions that money perform. Money primary function of money is to act as a medium of exchange and store of value. So that means these two functions are there. So the difference between the classical views and modern views is that classical people considered only one function, that is medium of exchange, whereas modern people or modern economists consider the second function of primary category, that is your store of value. So the basic difference between these two views, that is classical views or classical theory or modern theory, lies in the fact that classical people consider the transaction function of money, whereas the modern people consider the store of value function of money. So in the views of modern economists, the modern view of concept of demand for money, however, is different from the classical view. According to the modern view, money, besides acting as a medium of exchange, also perform another important function known as store of value. The demand for money, therefore, not only arises for the purpose of exchange, but it also arises for the storing the value. That means even if I have less transactions to do, I can demand more money if I want to store it into any other form, or if I want to store the value of anything in the form of money. If you remember, we have discussed this in the case of like discussing the near money. When we have discussed about the near money, we have seen that the value of money can be converted into any other form. So in this modern views, they are considering that function of money, that is store of value. The value of anything can be converted into money and it can be stored. Further, it is not necessary that people should spend immediately all the money that they have. Money can be preserved as a form of wealth or as an asset which can be most easily converted into any other form of wealth at any time. That means money, people can keep money just to convert it into any other form of wealth. Thus, money being most liquid asset can serve as a store of value. Hence, money is demanded for its own sake. That means money is not only demanded for transaction or demanding goods and services, money can be demanded just for other purposes which money fulfill. So that is why modern views are more broader as compared to classical views. Further, the demand for money thus means the demand for money to hold cash balance. Classical theory is known as a cash transaction because it considered transaction as a base, whereas modern views consider over and above transaction purpose, people also demand cash for holding balance. That is why this is known as a cash balance approach. The community's demand, community means economy or country, the community's demand for money is conceived as the aggregate cash balances or money holdings of all individuals at a given moment of time. At a particular moment of time, whatever is the total holdings of individuals will be part of money demand or demand for money. So whatever money they are possessing at a particular point of time will be considered as a demand for money. In other words, the modern approach to the demand for money stresses on the people's need for cash or money balances as a store of value at a particular point of time. That is, it involves people's preference, choice to hold liquid cash or money rather than other assets as a store of value. That means, in the modern views, people can hold money either in the form of cash, or it can hold other assets, so that they can convert it into money in future. That is why the person has to make a choice, either he want to keep more cash or he want to keep another form of assets into which money can be converted. This preference of liquidity cash is described by the Keynes in the theory known as liquidity preference theory of Keynes. This is the modern theory of Keynes. This will be discussing in detail. So, according to modern views, people are preferring to hold a cash. There are various reasons for holding a cash. That reasons are explained by the Keynesian theory of liquidity preference. Now, as far as the modern views are concerned, Keynes has given a theory for the demand for money that is known as the Keynesian theory of demand for money. Now, Keynes, in his well-known book, propounded a theory for demand for money, which occupies an important place in his monetary theory. It is also worth noting that for demand for money to hold, Keynes used the term liquidity preference. So Keynes used the term liquidity, and we have seen while discussing the difference between money and near money, and we have seen money is the most liquid form. Therefore, whenever we are using the word liquidity, it means cash. So why people would like to hold a cash? There are reasons for that. So Keynes has given a reason for holding a cash by people. How much of his income or resource will a person hold in the form of ready money, that is cash, and how much he will uh, part part with means he will spare or he will keep apart. So, and how much he will part with or lend depends upon what Keynes called liquidity preference. That means, out of total income, how much a person is going to keep ready cash for transaction purpose, and how much he will lend it for other purposes will depend upon liquidity preference. Therefore, liquidity preference means the demand for money to hold, or the desire of the public to hold cash. That means how much uh, money people would like to hold in the form of cash is known as a liquidity preference. Now, Keynes has given there are three reasons, three motives, purposes for which the cash is demanded or cash is desired. So these three motives are known as a transaction motive, precautionary motive, speculative motive. Now, the transaction motive and precautionary motive are together known as a L1, liquidity preference 1, and speculative motive is separately studied because the factors affecting speculative motive are different from the first two component, that is transaction and precautionary motive. That is why it is known as a L2. So the total liquidity preference of Keynes can be known by adding or summing up L1 and L2. The transaction motive, we all know that we require to do a day-to-day transaction for our routine activities. Therefore, we would like to hold a cash with us. So the transaction motive indicates if the person want to spend for his routine activities or day-to-day activities, he need to have a cash. The transaction motive relates to the demand for money or the need for money balances for the current transaction of individuals and business firm. Individuals hold cash in order to bridge the gap or interval between the receipt of income and its expenditure. We all know that we are getting income once in a month. So income is paid monthly or weekly. It is, if income is paid daily, then we would not hold more money in the form of cash. So we receive income only once, and we have to spend for the entire month or entire period of 30 days. That means we are getting income at one point of time, and we have to spend it for a entire month or for a particular period of time. That is why we would like to keep a cash with us. In other words, people hold money or cash balances for transaction purpose because receipt of money and payment do not coincide, do not match, because we receive money at a different point of time, and we make payment at a different point of time. We are not making payment the moment I am receiving money. I received money, let us say I am getting my salary on the first of every month, but I need to spend money on other days of the month. So I'll keep my money in the form of cash. Further, a poor man will hold less money for transaction motive as he spend less because of his small income. On the other hand, a rich man will tend to hold more for transaction motive as his expenditure will be greater. So the transaction motive depends on the level of income. That means if a person is having a large income or more income, he will keep more part of that as a cash. Whereas a poor person who is having less income will keep less part of his income as a cash. If take an example, if a person is getting 1 lakh rupee salary a month, he may keep a 25,000 ready cash. Whereas if a person who is getting a 10,000 rupees as a income, he may keep 1,000 rupees as a cash. So a person who is having less income will prefer to hold less amount of money as a cash, whereas a person who is having more income will prefer to have more cash. That is why it is having a direct relation with the level of income. More the level of income, more will be the desire to keep cash. Less the income, less will be the desire to keep cash. So according to Keynes, the transaction demand for money depends only on the real income and is not influenced by the rate of interest. Rate of interest is not affecting the demand for transaction purpose. Transaction purpose demand depend upon the level of income of a person and the amount of transaction that person is doing. So it is not affected due to the interest. So interest has no role to play in case of transaction motive demand. So it is affected by income, level of income, not level of rate of interest. Second reason that why we would like to hold cash is precautionary motive. We know that future is uncertain, and in case of any emergency or contingency, we need to have a money as a ready cash. So we are keeping money for cash for meeting our unforeseen or contingent requirement. For example, like if somebody falls sick, somebody met with an accident, somebody loses his job, so at that time whatever money he is holding in the form of cash will help him to survive. That is why precautionary motive is also affected by your level of income. Generally, the people who are having more income would like to hold more money for a precautionary purpose, whereas the person who is having less income would like to hold less money for a precautionary purpose. So this precautionary demand for money is also affected by the same factor, that is your level of income. Now, let us discuss this point. Precautionary motive for holding money refers to the desire of the people to hold cash balances for unforeseen contingencies. People hold certain amount of money to provide security for a danger of unemployment, sickness, accident, and any uncertain event. The amount of money demanded for this motive will depend on the psychology of an individual and condition in which he lives. Psychology of people means certain people are pessimistic, certain people are optimistic. Generally, pessimistic people will prefer to hold more money for a precautionary purpose, whereas optimistic people will keep less money for a precautionary purpose. And the condition in which he lives, if the condition in which he lives is more risky or is more fluctuating, then he will keep more money as a precautionary motive. Whereas if the conditions are stable and suitable, favorable, then the demand for precautionary motive will be less. So this depend upon the subjective factor, which differs from person to person. So these factors are not going to affect everybody in the same manner. It depends upon the psychology and the mental condition of an individual. Third and most important component of demand for money is your speculative demand for money. Now, speculative means taking advantage of a particular situation so that we can earn more money. So the speculative motive for uh, demand for money refers to the desire to hold one's resources in the liquid form in order to take advantage of market movements regarding the future changes in the rate of interest or bond prices. The cash held under this motive is used to make speculative gains by dealing in the bonds whose prices fluctuate. So if I want to take advantage of bond or share market or any other financial asset, immediately I have to keep money ready cash, because we don't know when we are going to get an opportunity to grab the benefit. So those who are keeping ready cash with them will benefit at the time of increase in the price in case of speculative demand for money. Now here the interest rate will be affecting your demand for money. First two cases, that is your transaction and precautionary motive, are dependent on level of income, whereas your speculative demand for money depends upon your rate of interest. That is why first two components are clubbed together and it is known as L1, whereas the third component, that is your speculative demand for money, is studied separately and it is known as L2. So total demand for money will be your L1 plus L2. Now in this speculative demand for money, rate of interest is going to affect your demand for money. Thus the demand for money under speculative motive is a function of current rate of interest and increasing as the interest rate falls and decreases as the interest rate increases. That means there is a negative inverse or opposite relationship between rate of interest and speculative demand for money. For example, if rate of interest in a if rate of interest is more, I would not like to keep my money as a cash. I'll keep my money in the form where I'm getting more rate of interest. Let us take example of bank. If bank is giving me more rate of interest, I will not keep money with me and I'll keep money in the bank because I'm getting more rate of interest. If the rate of interest is less in the bank, I'll keep my money as a cash so that I can get opportunity to earn more interest or more return by investing money in shares or bonds, so that I have to compare the demand for money with respect to rate of interest. So there is a negative relation between these two components, that is your demand for money will move in a opposite direction as compared to rate of interest. The same thing can be presented in the form of diagram. Now you can see here that in the diagram LP, that is your liquidity preference, you will see that this curve is becoming flatter, horizontal at the rate of interest R double dash. That means if the rate of interest fall at a minimum level, the liquidity preference will become inelastic. There will be no effect of rate of interest on liquidity preference if it falls at the minimum level. So that is your liquidity preference curve when it will become flatter. If you will see the upper part, that is from the point E to E double dash, you will see as the rate of interest is falling, on the y-axis we are measuring rate of interest, on x-axis we are measuring speculative demand for money. So you will see that when the rate of interest is falling, let us assume that the initial rate of interest is r dash, middle one r dash, then the demand for speculative demand for money will be m1, and the equilibrium will take place at the point E. Now, if the rate of interest increases from OR1 to OR, then the demand for speculative money will reduce. It will reduce from OM1 to OM. It will move from right, it will move towards left hand side. Similarly, if you will see that if the rate of interest is falling from OR single dash to OR double dash, then our demand for speculative purpose will decrease, and it will it will increase, and it will reach to the point E double dash. So when the rate of interest is falling, then we are going to keep more money in the form of cash, and if the rate of interest is increasing, we are going to keep less money for the purpose of speculation purpose. Demand for money means cash. So there is inverse relation between rate of interest and demand for cash. So if rate of interest is increasing, demand for cash will decrease. If rate of interest is decreasing, demand for cash will increase. So students, this is what we have to study in this chapter. This is regarding the quantity, this is regarding the theory of demand for money. Now in next class we are going to start with the demand, that is supply of money. This we have discussed about the demand for money. In next class we are going to start with the supply of money, that who supplies the money and what are the components of money. Thank you very much.